Mike, check, check, check. Justin Hunt, it's all happening. Thank you to everybody rocking with the channel. Thank you to everyone who subscribed, who shared a link, shared a video, let people know what we're doing over here, spreading the good word. It's appreciated. Big thank you to everybody who's donated to the Cash App or to the link tree. You can find the link tree in the description. You can find the Cash App right up there. Big thank you to Terrence Washington, DSMJR, Antoine Kingsbury, my man Antoine Kingsbury, always holding me down, man. Salute to you sincerely, sincerely. Benjamin Walton III, Francine Wilson, Michael Brown, Adrian D. Perez, Kesha D. Shaw, they all donated this past week. Thank you so much for your donations. And big shout out to my two newest members, Milan Gutierrez and DKVO2. 9-second applause. Thank you. Word up. So big thank you to everybody again, sincerely, for rocking with me. We've got another clip from Culture United that's on the channel right now. This is the dad rap clip and new artists that we really rock with, new albums we really rock with, so make sure you check that out. I also have the full conversation with Coyote on the channel right now. It was available for members, now it's available for the world. That's one of my favorite new groups out this year, so check that out. And we have another Culture United coming up. It'll be tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have another one so that you guys are the first to hear it. Now, some surprises too. I think you'll see some surprises in this one. Now, first story up. RZA, legendary rapper RZA, legendary producer RZA, legendary visionary RZA, legendary man who has made many decades making lives better RZA. He had a great conversation with Complex last week. And, you know, there's a few things that he talks about that I definitely think are worth making note of. But one of the craziest things that I think perhaps didn't crack a lot of people's radars is that RZA put out an orchestral album this year. So he put out a classical orchestral album in 2024. He dropped it in July, if I'm not mistaken. The project is called A Ballet Through Mud. Ballet Through Mud, pretty awesome title if you ask me. And so in this Complex conversation, he talks about some of the challenges of putting that project together. One studio time was $20,000 as opposed to maybe $2,000 when you're working on a rap album or something like that. And so everyone had to be in sync and just the learning process through that. And my mind immediately jumps to New Blue Sun by Andre 3000, of course, his flute album. Well, in this conversation, Complex asked him about that album. He said something really interesting about Andre's flute album and his classical album. So what happened was during the pandemic, they're actually on a plane at the same time and just started talking, and turns out both of them were working on very unconventional projects for their reputations. Here's what RZA said. He said, "I wasn't finished with it. We both were at the beginning phases of our albums. His demo was rough. My demo was rough. We happened to be on the same flight together, and we was talking, and Andre is a super unique artist and super unique spirit. Just love him. And if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have shared. But we were talking, and he was like, yeah, I'm kind of doing this thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of doing this thing. And then it was great to see that he carried it through, and I'm also proud that I carried it through. Achieving your goal is another point of reference that I strive for. Some people ask me, what's the great thing you get out of it? To me, completing the goal, that is my reward because I'm seeing something come from a thought to a physical manifestation. Success is completion. 1 second applause for success is completion. That's big. I mean, honestly, that's a very serendipitous flight, it seems like. Can you imagine sitting on the flight next to someone else and you're branching way out there into uncharted territories for you as a creative? And here is another icon in his own right, just sitting next to you in the same, I imagine, first class, and he's doing the same thing. You know, you have New Blue Sun, the flute project, and you have Ballet Through Mud, which is RZA's project. Did I say that right? Let me make sure I said that right. A Ballet Through Mud. 1 second applause for getting that right. So I thought this was a really interesting touch point here, and it's another reminder that creativity doesn't stop. A couple of stories that we'll get to today actually delve into that point a little bit more. And having the freedom to be able to expound on the world as you see it is a blessing. It's not something that I think people should restrict themselves from doing. Now, maybe everything isn't necessarily the best for a commercial release. I'm not saying anything about these two projects, but artists who experiment are very high on my list of artists I appreciate the most. You know what I mean? So that was one very interesting nugget that came from this conversation with Complex. Later on in the conversation, RZA had something very interesting to say about up-and-coming artists. And so the question was, who have been some up-and-coming artists that have been impressing you lately? Here's RZA. Well, I don't know, but I can speak as hip-hop. I can speak as a hip-hop statesman here. I love that the women are getting their voice. There's so many, and I just will hope that they don't abuse it like we did, because men abused it because we could. Men abused it because we could. Well, and we just took it and we forgot about the substance and we just kept going. That's part of growing up and all that. But at least in my generation and the generation before me, you could have KRS-One telling you this, and A Tribe Called Quest telling you this, and MC Lyte telling you this. It was so many substances, and point of views versus it becoming very tunnel vision and narrow-minded, which I think we are now, even though the music is great. Now that the women are having the strongest voices they're out there, and it's ripping it talent-wise, flow-wise, lyric-wise. I just hope that they don't forget the substance and start turning into us. Don't turn into us. Don't forget the beauty of a woman that's different than the beauty of a man. Don't forget the wisdom of a woman that's different from the wisdom of a man, and that experience now that you have a platform to give us the experience. So I think what he's saying here more than anything else is like, don't try to be dudes. A lot of rap chicks try to be dudes out here. Don't think you got to go do that. Don't think you got to go be dudes. But as a message to anybody who's a creative, regardless of their gender, substance is what keeps the career pumping. Like I'm very curious. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think everybody has their fans, but I'm very curious to see certain artists mature and see what their what their tours might look like when they're 40 and 50. Like, what does a Little Pump tour look like when he's 40? Like, what does that actually look? What does the Tekashi 6ix9ine tour look like when he's 40 or 50? Like, what is that actually? This isn't shots. It's like a very real question to me. And not to say that they don't have substance, which I don't think they do, by the way. But that's not the point of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the artists that transcend, regardless of genre, tend to be the ones that have the strongest, most visceral connection to an audience. And generally speaking, that's through having relevant, substantive things to share. So I thought this was a great piece of this conversation as well, where he's talking about, ladies, don't turn into us and forget about the substance. The music can be great. You can not be saying stuff. And it's still not the best of what's made this genre and this culture great. You know what I'm saying? Knowledge is at the foundation of hip-hop. 1 second applause. All right, so that was another great moment in this conversation. This one too. So Complex asked RZA. Now keep in mind, I mean, when did 36 Chambers come out? 93? Feels like 93. He has a very wide-ranging, broad look at everything that's ever happened, right? If you're dropping in 93, you've seen everything in the 80s, generally speaking. You're not far away from the inception of all of this. And so they asked him a great question. He said, what do you think is the greatest year in hip-hop history? And he said, I think 86 and 87 was very powerful for hip-hop. What was coming in at that period of time was incredible, and maybe it even lasted up till 88. And then it dampens, and then I think from 93 to 95, it goes again. And I'm saying that because if you go back to those times in those years, you'll find hundreds of variations when you get to a certain year, the variations are getting less and less. Then when you get to now, the variations are almost down to a dozen patterns. A dozen patterns. It's a dozen templates. And to me, hip hop is the strongest when it's unpredictable and when there's hundreds of variations. So for me, I would look in those two windows of time to find the best years. Dozens of variations, and I think a lot of times it can resonate as if because the internet is so vast and everyone has an opportunity to share their creations and their music and their art and be in the marketplace, with major stars in the space, that there's a lot more diversity. I hear people make that comment quite a bit, that there's a lot more diversity. I think there's a lot more diversity of voices. I definitely think that there's a wider range of regions represented. I think there's obviously hip hop has gone global in a brand new way, and maybe the way we cover the culture here in the United States is truthfully leaving out a planet's worth of innovations and how this has been embraced in countries all over the globe, But 12 templates, that's very interesting to think about. Very interesting to think about. And I tend to agree. I think I would have to tend to agree. Like, whether you call it, gangster rap, trap, drill, or whatever, that's in the same energy, the same conversation in a lot of ways. I think whether you're doing a triplet flow over whatever you're rapping over in different types of production, if you're using a triplet, you're using a triplet, which is very popular. And I think that in a lot of ways where this quote directly resonates with me most is just the lack of imagination that I hear from the things that people are talking about, and also how they're talking about them. And I mean, that's one of my favorite things about tailor-made freestyle again, right? It's a level of third-person storytelling that I don't see often from Drake, but generally speaking, I don't see very often from artists, like especially new artists. Everything is in this is my life, everything is real, this is how, this is what happened to me, and this is my perspective, and this is how I'm putting it down on wax, right? There's not as many different approaches to telling that same story. Like, a big shout out to hip-hop heroes, Hop Heroes, Arturo, good friend of mine, incredible voice on hip-hop on Twitter. You should follow him at Hop Heroes, excuse me. And he's one of the biggest Jay-Z fans. I know Jay-Z got a lot of big fans. One second applause for Jay-Z fans. Hov got a lot of fans, but he's a very big one. And, one of the things Hov talks about, or that represents Hov, is how everything he raps about is really happened one way or the other. But Hov was also really good at third-person storytelling, Meet the Parents, I believe, is one of the songs. But I got caught up listening to Volume 3 the other day, and, the track about him in court. I can't think of the name right now, but there's a whole court scene that he plays out on a song. Even things like that don't seem like they happen as often. And in that regard, I think I do connect with what RZA's saying, when it's like, okay, there's 12 templates. Despite the fact that the 10 is much bigger, and maybe everything doesn't deserve to be in the hip hop box, even if the approach is pretty similar. But let me know what you guys think about this comment, because I thought this was very interesting. Like, we're down to 12 templates, and perhaps that's just the benefit of wisdom, to be able to see, the evolution of something that's been as impactful as hip hop. You could really just look around and say, oh, that's that. I have a degree of it. I think a lot of people, in my demographic, we have a degree of it, but in particular, you've got RZA, who's put together 36 chambers, and his last project is a ballet through mud that is a classical symphony orchestra. He has a totally different view of all this stuff, right? But let me know what you think about that particular point in the comment section. And then lastly, and this is the quote that got around a little bit, or at least part of the quote that got around a little bit, but Complex asked them, they said, "You've shown admiration for both Kendrick Lamar and Drake in the past. Do you think those two will ever reconcile after the way their rap war has gone?" And RZA seems, for a written interview, he sounds pretty resolute. yeah, it just takes time. First of all, Kendrick is the natural lyricist and Drake is a trained lyricist. You could train a fighter and he could be good, but then you got those natural fighters who also then go through training. So that's a different chamber there. And while Drake got bars forever, Kendrick's bars potency was stronger. I'd have to agree with that. I think that's a very flat statement. Not flat in terms of negative, the way that RZA is framing that, but I think that is objectively the truth. Okay. So the battle, bar for bar, was something that was just not good advising on Drake's camp, in the sense of just getting in that fight without really taking some more training for that. I think that conversation has been around, since this battle has ended. People have gone back and forth around. Some people think that Drake shouldn't have got into this battle at all. I give him a lot of props for doing that. I think, like, to me, he was outnumbered. I mean, away from just being, having other people come at him. I mean, if it's Drake versus Kendrick one-on-one, I just thought, just lyrically, the range of things that Kendrick has done over the course of his career, that alone was going to be something difficult for anybody who battles him to to get past. Like, just the sheer number of styles and how he lets his imagination go into places that most artists, as we talk about, are sitting in the same 12 templates. You know what I mean? But just the advising on that. And I think that speaks to, plenty of conversations we've had on this channel and on other channels about just the missteps. So I see where RZA's coming from here. He continues, when Kendrick wrote that letter to his son or his daughter and to his mother, Kendrick is going to come like that. Nas, Kendrick, Eminem, Raekwon, certain people are going to break your ish down to the element. But in doing so, I do think that a lot was said, and Drake is a powerful artist in our culture. He helped the culture when the culture needed it. He expanded it with his melodies, and he raised a generation too, and you can't take that away from him. And these two were at the top of the pinnacle at the end of the day. And you said Nas and Jay-Z, that's another good example, but it was tough. It took years for them to swallow that pill and then come and shake hands on it. So hopefully it's not the same. Hopefully this generation can take it as fun, like how the beginning generation took it more as fun. Right, that's a lot. I mean, I think that's where the Control verse came from. For example, Ab-Soul, during this conversation on Effective Immediately with DJ Head, he was talking about how, they would just show up at different parking lots, different places, and just get the cipher on, because that's the fun element, this element of it. This is what people mean when they say hip hop is rooted in competition. Just the cipher, the battle itself can be fun. I mean, there's a Smack URL and RBE and all these leagues. They revel in that particular aspect of it, so not everything has to be, life or death, even though there can be career ramifications. Some people never come back the same after they lose a rap battle. So it is a very serious moment, but, that doesn't mean you can't piece it up at the end. You know what I mean? Sometimes, the friendly fate is the best way to go. He continues again. When you think about Busy B and Cool Mo D, they'd battle, lose, and battle again next year, and then smoke a joint with each other. It got to a level with Tupac and Biggie where it became no reconciliation. And then when it got to Jay and Nas, it was tough. And we had a few other tough ones like that. I think now they can reconcile, because the thing that these young brothers should recognize, and I can speak on this here in the physical form, is that as you get older, you gain more knowledge and wisdom and experience, and you'd be more heedful. Even Martin Luther King had a meeting with Malcolm X later in life. In the early days, that wasn't happening. So hopefully as they mature as humans, they would go, wow, that shit was crazy. That shit was fun. I ate you up. You know what I mean? But yo, I love that other joint. My son loved your joint. My son loved your joint. That's what it is. And here we are for the culture coming together. It took MC Shan and KRS-One decades. That's an incredible perspective from a wise sage who has crafted his own subgenre almost within hip hop, but also has, more than anything else, elevated so many different artists in this space, and truthfully, as a person on his own, has grown and embraced, all that life and energy has to offer. So I really appreciated RZA's perspective on this. Do you guys think that Kendrick and Drake will piece it up? Or do you guys think that maybe some things are, just a little too much to get past? I hope for the former. But let me know what you guys think about this conversation with RZA. My name is Justin Hunt. Like, subscribe to the channel. Follow at The Company Man on everything. I got tongue-tied right there. It's all happening.
Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. The mathematical breakdown of this mighty game of rap we in. It's boom bapping. Systematical culture views that's radical, it's all happening. Shaking hands and dabbing them. Life through the lens of hip hop, from trip hop to yes, y'all, you don't stop, you don't stop. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. It's all happening, yes, it's all happening. Justin Hunt is here, it's all happening. It's all happening, yes, it's all happening.